Chapter 5, Being a Good Leader. Chapter outline: Introduction, Ethical Leadership, Character Based Approaches to Leadership, Summary. Values, Ethics, and Character. Leadership cannot just be going along to get along. Leadership must meet the moral challenge of the day. Jesse Jackson, American civil rights leader. So, in other words, you can't, when you become a leader, you have to make some hard decisions. You can't just be someone that said, I'm going to lead, but I'm going to try to, my goal is to get along with everybody. Your goal is to lead. And sometimes that means you do not get along with people, or you may have to disagree with people, or you have to stand your ground because you are doing what's ethical and you're going by your values. And also, if you have character, you won't compromise that. Introduction: Leaders can use power for good or ill. I repeat, good or ill. In other words, good or bad. Leaders' personal values and ethical code may be the most important determinants of how that leader exercises available power sources. Recent scandals involving political, business, and religious figures highlight the need to consider values and ethics uh, in terms of leadership. Scholarly and popular literature have turned greater attention to the question of ethical leadership. So, in other words, you can't take a person who has low morals and values and put them in a position of leadership and expect them to have high morals and values. The caliber of the person means something. So if you put low caliber people in positions of leadership, they're going to do things that's consistent with low caliber people. If you put high caliber people in there who have values and ethics and codes and morals, they will govern. They will, sorry, not govern. They will lead accordingly. Leaders face dilemmas that require choices between competing sets of values and priorities. The best leaders recognize dilemmas and face them with a commitment to doing what is right, not just what is expedient. Leaders set moral example that becomes the model for an entire group of organization. Leaders should internalize a strong set of ethics, which are principles and right to conduct system of moral values. Developing and sustaining ethical leadership. So, what does it mean to have to behave ethically in the groups and organizations we are part of? It certainly does not mean always being a perfect person. Ethical leadership. Here it is: the ability to consider issues from a multiple perspectives, including what is fair and just, and encourages followers to do the same through inspiring conduct, fair and just decision making, and humane. So when you think of ethical leadership, I can tell you a lot of times when we think of politicians, this is why a lot of times we think negative of politicians, because many times we believe they do not behave in an ethical manner. When you look at corporate America, they do what is politically, not politically correct, but what's good for their party or what's any number of things, but it may not be for the right reason. When it comes to leadership, this is where people, when they're above approach. And I can tell you what a lot of people will say about an ethical leader. Most people will say, you know what, she's fair. She'll listen to you, she'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but she's fair. And that's the best way to look at it. When I think of that, when I've heard people use that word right there, they're describing an ethical leader. Kohlberg's theory of moral development. Kohlberg's theory of moral development discusses 6 stages of behavior. Stage 1, bad behavior is that which is punished. Good behavior, which is concretely rewarded. Good behavior is what is which is approved by others. Bad behavior is that which is disapproved by others. Good behavior conforms to standards set by societal institutions, and transgressions lead to the feelings of guilt of dishonor. Moral reason and character-based leadership. So this is something that's very significant right here. Unconscious biases may affect one's moral judgment, which is why many organizations are developing programs to develop moral decision-making competency among leaders. Effectiveness of such programs depends on understanding the moral decision-making. So when you think of unconscious biases, this is a bias that people have that they're not aware of. For instance, if I was raised in a household where women were always considered second class, and if I was raised in a community where women were considered second class, If I became a leader, I may seriously still think that way and operate that way when I'm dealing with my employees or my peers. I think they're second class. Not that I'm trying to discriminate against them. It's an unconscious bias I had that's been instilled in me since I was little. Dual process theory or moral judgment. Moral judgments dealing primarily with rights and duties are made automatically by emotional responses, while those made on a more utilitarian basis are made more cognitively. So you got things that would happen where people how emotions can happen and lead you to do things, and then you can also have rationale and cognitive thinking that actually requires you to do so. So it's a dual process. Moral reasoning and character-based leadership. Research has identified biases that affect our moral decision making. Implicit bias, implicit prejudice, subconscious prejudice that affect one's decision without him or her being aware. That's what I was referring to earlier. And that is very common in many instances. In group favoritism, doing acts of kindness and favors for those who are like you. It's almost been proven people are most comfortable with people like themselves. And if you're not careful, you may start to favor that group because they're more like you. That could be you could share the same religion. You could come from the same culture. You could be the same race. You could have gone, seriously, you could have gone to the same universities as several people in your group, and you favor them because of that. So it could be any number of things. It could be because you are the same gender. Overclaiming credit. Overrating the quality of one's own work and contributions. Normally when I see this is usually something that's a self-serving mechanism, and these people are usually self-centered. So even though they are in a leadership position, their primary goal is to take care of themselves. Conflicts of interest, misjudging one's own ability to discount the extent to which a conflict actually biases one's perception of the situation in one's own favor. So conflict of interest, it can literally be, and I'll just give you an example. If I'm the person who works for a company that makes a certain product, and then I decide to start my own business, and I'm not making that product, but I am making something that actually that product uses. So there in essence will be a conflict. Or I'll give you an example, even in civilian, if you have a police officer who is policing the law and stuff, but yet he wants to open up a marijuana shop, that would be a conflict. Progress in understanding ethical behavior and increasing its likelihood or prevalence can be based on purely rational and rational-based approach. According to a study, although people's predictions were generally consistent with their personal values, their actual behavior often was not. Behavioral scripts from one's religious tradition could trigger and lead to ethical behavior without explicit moral reasoning. Some researchers believe that moral reasoning is rarely the direct cause of ethical judgment. So again, based on that background, your personal, and think about this, the things that someone's instilled from the time that they're little to the time they are grown, you don't stop being that. You bring that with you. That can be a benefit. That can be actually a hindrance in certain situations. But in some cases and stuff, I've worked with some clients in my business who've told me that they was work with some people from other cultures, some men from other cultures who actually view the women as less than. So, but problem is they work for this guy. So, you see these different types of things that pop up, but, and you see moral reasoning can come in, get in contact, can conflict with ethical judgment. Moral justification, reinterpreting otherwise immoral behavior in terms of higher purpose. So sometimes you can say that, you know what, this is what the situation says right here. I'm not interpreting it from my business leader rationale. I interpret it from my personal, and that could be based on my morals, and that could be an issue. Euphemistic labeling, using cosmetic words to diffuse or disguise the offensiveness or otherwise moral repugnant or distasteful behavior. Basically, if someone says that I'm working with a guy or I'm working with this woman and she does these things that just are outright despicable and I think it's disrespectful, and then I find a way to say, well, you should just, because she doesn't mean anything by that, so you should just look over it. Advantageous comparison, letting one avoid self contempt for one's behavior by comparing it to an even more heinous behavior by others. So, in other words, if I was your manager and I got on you about something, and then you said, well, you didn't get on, let's say I'm getting on you about stealing apples. So now you says, well, you didn't get on Mary about stealing peaches. Well, guess what? We work at an apple business. The peaches that she stole from somebody else. Yeah, it's wrong, but it ain't the same thing. You're stealing from the company. But now you're trying to tell me, well, this ain't so bad because she was stealing too. But it's not the same thing. Diffusion of responsibility, reprehensible behavior becoming easier to engage in and live with if others are behaving the same way. Well, if everybody else is doing bad and I can do it too, I can say, okay, it justifies me doing it. Well, they did it too. Disregard or distortion of consequences minimizes actual harm caused by one's behavior. It's like, if you do something to somebody or you do something at work and it really causes a problem with something that you made or something that you were supposed to do, you can always try to say, you know what, it wasn't that bad. I don't understand why you're getting upset with me because it wasn't that bad. Dehumanization, avoiding the consequences of one's behavior by dehumanizing those who are affected by it. And this is something that you see prevalent a lot of times in racism and things along those lines. Or when one group of people put down another group, you got to dehumanize them. And we've seen this throughout history. If you look at when you see people who are at odds with other folks, the one thing that they always do initially is dehumanize them, make them less than. Then it's easier for you to say and do things to them and not feel guilty. Attribution of blame justifies one's immoral behavior by claiming it was caused by someone else's actions. The reason I did it, you caused me to do that. I wasn't going to do this, but you caused, because you did that, that's why I did this. And this is how I'm trying to justify. Ethical leadership across the organization. So, upward ethical leadership behavior enacted by individuals who take action to maintain ethical standards in the face of questionable moral behaviors by higher ups. So, generally, the quality of an organization's ethical climate affects whether or not employees raise ethical concerns. In ethical climates, ethical standards and norms are consistently and clearly communicated, embraced, enforced by the organization leaders. In unethical climates, unethical behavior exists when little corrective action, and misbehavior may be condoned. So, leadership, behavior, the culture, the behavior, the norms are set from the top down. So if you have a group who is leaders or who are running an organization or who are leading leadership positions, and they set a climate of misconduct, doing things wrong and condoning misbehavior and breaking the rules or whatever else, then you have an unethical climate, and that's what other people will follow. And it's just opposite if it's ethical. Formal leadership roles. Formal leadership roles imposes unique ethical responsibilities and challenges. Leaders more than followers possess unique degrees of both legitimate and coercive power, enjoy greater privilege, have access to more information, have greater authority and responsibility, interact with a broader range of stakeholders who expect equitable treatment, must balance sometimes competing loyalties when making decisions. So as leaders, you're always going to have more access to people, more information, more opportunity, more stakeholders. The $64,000 question is, what will you do with that? Will you use these things to do the right thing that's legitimate? And notice it says sometimes you will have competing loyalties when making decisions. You have to determine where your loyalties lie. And are you making the proper decisions? And remember, it's a domino effect. The decision you make as a leader affects everybody who usually works below you. Creating and sustaining the ethical climate. Fronts of leadership action that are required to create an ethical climate. Formal ethics policies and procedures. Core ideology, integrity, structural reinforcement, process focus. So when you look at this, it's not a light switch, it's a process. And it starts with your policies and procedures. What are your policies and procedures? And are you following those policies and procedures so that you can get others to do the same? What's your core ideology? I mean, realistically, what are your beliefs? That comes into play. I'll give you an example. If you have a policy, but you at your core believe that policy is not a good policy, then you may not follow it. See, based on your core belief. Integrity. Or do you have an integrity as a leader? Integrity, are you being fair and open and transparent with people? Do you have integrity? And I'm going to tell you, you know what integrity is basically? Is do you do the right thing when people aren't looking? Or you could possibly have an opportunity to do the right thing. Do you still do the right thing? That's integrity. Structural reinforcement. When you put things into place so that things can run smooth and ethically, then you must structurally reinforce that. Basically, set up the guardrails so that, for people who may not necessarily want to follow the rules or might have a propensity to dip every now and then, you got structural reinforcement that keeps things in place so that they can't. In other words, help keep an honest man honest. Process focus. Focus on the process. Is when you put things in place, if you got 10 groups working for you, are all 10 groups and they do the same thing, are they doing it the same way? Is the process the same? And if you got 10 groups and they're doing 10 different ways, you're going to have a problem. But if you have process focus, everybody's doing the same thing. Principle-centered leadership asserts a fundamental interdependence between the personal, interpersonal, managerial, and organizational levels of management. Interdependence between the levels positions posited in principle-centered leadership is quite similar to the conceptualizations of authentic leadership, which also views it as a multi-level phenomenon. So all these different levels, when you have centered leadership, everything is connected. At some point, everything comes together. Between the personal, interpersonal, managerial, organizational level, things are connected and they're interdependent. Basically, it means they have to rely on each other to get things done. McGregor's Theory X and Y. Theory X asserts that most people need extrinsic motivation because they are not naturally motivated to work. In other words, most people don't do their job because they're motivated to do the right thing. They need things that help motivate them to do the right thing. Theory Y is kind of a negative concept realistically. Theory Y asserts that most people are intrinsically motivated by their work, meaning most people want to actually do their work because it's the right thing to do. Most people are basically good and moral. Authentic leadership. Authentic leaders exhibit consistently among their values, their beliefs, and their actions. Again, authentic leaders exhibit consistency among their values, their beliefs, and their actions. Are self-aware, self-consciously align their actions with the inner values. So this is when people, they know who they are, they know what the policies are, and they know it, and they align everything properly, their values, their beliefs, and their actions. And just to say that with authentic leadership, if someone has a belief that's not consistent with a company policy, they don't let their personal belief get in the way of doing the right thing. Character-based approach to leadership. Study of authentic leadership has gained momentum because of the following beliefs. Enhancing self-awareness can help people and organizations find more meaning at work. Promoting transparency and openness in relationships builds trust and commitment. Fostering more inclusive structures and practices can help build more positive ethical climates. I can tell you, historically, you've had organizations that didn't believe in none of this. It was none of this they believed in. What research has shown is if you operate with these character-based ethics, you actually can get better results. And you can actually cut down on a lot of things such as attrition, people quitting, and employee satisfaction, the works. So, servient leadership views others as being the leader's role. Characteristics of servient leaders. So, a servant leadership views serving others as being the leader's role. So characteristics of the servant leaders. So this is where you actually are working with other people and you view yourself as serving and working with folks. Listen to what other people say. Be the kind of person that people think they can talk to. Empathy is when you share in someone's sorrow or you share in their feelings. Healing, help people to advance and overcome whatever it may be, whether it be a little old lady that works for you and her dog died and she is distraught because it was only her and her dog. No one else. She had no other family members, but the dog was a family. How do you help her? Awareness, being aware of the situation. And I call it situational awareness of what's around you, reading the tea leaves, what's going on. Persuasion, Do you have the art of persuasion to get people to do the things that they need to do? Help find common ground with some kind of conversation. Help people do it. Be conceptualization. When you look at things, can you conceptualize how you would like to get things done? This is where you have to be able to think inside your head, because it's not an actual concept or process just yet. Foresight, looking down the road. Do you see where we're going to go next? Do you have the foresight to see, we're doing this, but there's a high probability this may morph into something else? Stewardship is the work that you put in and to make things work. Be a good steward. And that means a lot of times when I've seen people who are leaders who are good stewards, they would do some things that you wouldn't believe they would do. As a matter of fact, they will do things that you would never know about because it's in their nature to go and do something. I never forget one lady who had a problem pregnancy and was ill and had to stay out of work after she had a pregnancy for a while. Her boss on a Saturday morning took her a bag of groceries. That ain't in his job description to do that, but he wanted to do that for her. Commitment to others' growth. You want to ensure that people grow in your organization, and you never try to hold them back. For instance, if they try to advance and move up or take advantage of career opportunities. Building community. When you build your community, when you have a team or multiple teams or within an organization, that's your community. Build your community. Find ways to make it strong. Find ways to make it cohesive. Find ways to get it to work together. Summary. There's a relationship between ethics, values, and leadership. It is not just the content of what one believes is right and wrong, but how one makes moral and ethical judgments. Ethical dilemmas often involve a choice between two rights, rather than choices between a right and wrong. I will say that again. Ethical dilemmas often involve between making a decision between two things is right, not necessarily right and wrong. Recent research has explored the interdependencies between effective leadership and particular value systems. There is an increased interest in recent years in the kinds of practices that can be instituted within organizations to enhance the likelihood that there will be ethical climates. That concludes this chapter.